Thank you and good afternoon. It's always a tough spot right after lunch, but I'll try to kind of make it relevant so that you will stay with me. As it's a fairly small group, please raise your hand also in between, so we don't have to wait for the whole half an hour or at the end of the talk. My name is Andreas Korczak, and I'm from Microsoft, leading the portfolio of products, marketing, communications, as well as the sales operations. And what you've seen also upstairs, actually, in Fujitsu with the breadth of technology solutions, the same is very much at the Microsoft side. It is an ever-expanding breadth of potential applications and solutions we are offering, and that's why it's a very exciting time. What I want to talk about today is the journey of bringing this breadth, bringing this richness of technology into everybody's business. And I call it from plan to pilot to execution, because there's a lot of times there are certain barriers why we could not do something, and I will hopefully explain some ideas of how you should overcome it. Either by a cultural change, and in the morning we heard already a lot about cultural trust building, empathy, and other topics, or then by building the capabilities in your team to take the agenda forward. But let me start with a short video just to set the scene.
Today, right now, you have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. Think about that. That's what technology really is. It's possibility, it's adaptability, it's capability. But in the end, it's only a tool. What's a hammer without a person who swings it? It's not about what technology can do, it's about what you can do with it. You're the voice, and it's the microphone. When you're the artist, it's the paintbrush. We are living in the future we always dreamed of. We have mixed reality that changes how we see the world, and AI empowering us to change the world we see. You have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. So here's the question: what will you do with it?
So that's the question. What will you do with it? What are we doing with it? What are we doing with the power what technology provides us? There's one number, 85%, and 85% is the response from executives of how many companies will actively deploy artificial intelligence. There are numbers which would say by 2030, there will be 14% growth in GDP possible, 15 billion of new economic power being generated. 90% of executives believe there is a huge value. And throughout my talk, I actually want to highlight a few more data points which will show that it's not anymore should we, but the question is how. The biggest driver is innovation. And this chart, actually, the most powerful part of it is on the bottom when you see the dates. You can see what has happened in the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, technology allowed us to move into parity with human capabilities in vision, in speech, in machine reading, as well as in translation. And these different percentages only give an indication either it's an error rate or it is a completion ratio. This means actually it's not anymore that we need to provide input and to get an output, but computing capabilities allow us already that it's taken further. It can listen, it can see, and it can provide interaction with us. This can be also daunting, because if you see the pace of how things are changing, and the talk before from the CTO from Fujitsu I think was very clearly highlighting the same topic. It is ever increasing the complexity as well, and it is for us sometimes quite difficult to understand of how do we stay on top of it. How does an environment around us look like? This is a picture. This is today happening. This is kind of how kind of an agricultural kind of operation kind of looks like. You have in the soil different sensors. They are looking at the moisture level, they're looking at temperature levels, they're checking the nitrogen, kind of they are suggesting the amount of water to be provided, the amount of fertilizer, and this can help kind of in a much better way to create higher yields, but also from an environmental perspective, most important, to not kind of put too many chemicals into the soil. And then kind of aggregating it and turning it into an ever-increasing amount of intelligence, which allows to learn and do better next time. How does it look at home? At home, most of us have already some intelligence. Kind of, you might have some kind of temperature meter, you might have some kind of your radios, or you might have an intelligence coffee maker. But now going forward, these will be all combined. It's not anymore the one IoT device which is sensing something and is acting on something, but with an AI enablement, with an AI platform, all of the IoT devices could act upon each other. You're coming home, and not only because you timed it at 7 o'clock that the music starts or the coffee is brewed, it will act, but because you open the door, you're recognized kind of from the vision and object recognition, the different actions are taking place. This is our environment. This is at home of how we already today could see it, and it's quite different of what we are used to. What does it mean for our work environment? And for the work environment, the most important asset we all have are people. And that's why I want to kind of highlight the need for the cultural awareness. What is culture? I have one definition here, which I believe describes it very nicely. It's a result of various behaviors, value structures, and processes. And most important, as leaders in an organization, as management, or as an employee kind of who interacts with peers, we need to support or discourage what to do. When in the morning Philip was talking about trust, this is a core, of course, to build a culture that you enable a trust environment. And on the right-hand side, I brought you here a study we took with 20,000 companies a year ago, where we are evaluating what is an employee environment for companies with a high digital culture versus a low or a weak digital culture. And when we say a digital culture, it means here, how is digital capabilities embraced? It's not only buying and providing the software. It is how do you use it, when you use it, what are you using, how are you engaging with your people around it, and how is actually this kind of brought to life. And you can see that there are significant differences. It's not only efficiencies or productivity, it is innovativeness, mainly driven by having more time as an employee gives the opportunity to do things what a machine will not be able to do. At least in the foreseeable future, there is no capability to do creative thinking, right? And that's actually why the innovation needs to stay with the employee. And then maybe most important, and it's the biggest change between 9% or 47%, a 5x increase in terms of empowerment, giving all of us as employees the possibility to decide ourselves and to take more accountability, to interact with the surrounding. So I want to talk about from plan to pilot to execution. And I want to say kind of now having the context laid out, what are different means to bring artificial intelligence into your organization? There are 3 different paths. The first one I call SaaS AI. So inbuilt artificial intelligence, it's inbuilt into the software solution you are having in your organization. And in some cases, people recognize already that there's AI embedded. In some cases, they actually don't know it, and we'll kind of look at some of the examples which you hopefully might recognize. There are AI accelerators, which means it's platform capabilities. So you don't need to start writing your code custom-made, but you can start like having the building blocks. Still, you need to kind of create the process and the kind of for your business and your needs kind of specifically, but you have pre-built models already, and you can therefore be much faster in the adoptions. Or then actually you go really to the custom AI. You have a problem, you need a solution, you need to build your data asset, and you need to run it, right? And there's a very different requirement of what you need to prepare for, and that's why here you can optimize for the time to market, and on the other side you would optimize for flexibility. But all of this would be artificial intelligence, and you in the morning kind of ask the question, who is using it, right? And you will see that we are all using it, and it's not anymore the question of why and what, but the question of how to bring the best out of it. Let's start with the first part, which is the pre-built AI. I like looking at this picture, and this is basically the backbone of why Microsoft can provide best possible pre-built capabilities. AI is built and as good as the data you are using and how you're structuring it and how you can interpret it. And the more you have well-organized data, the better you'll be able to actually get insight out of it. Microsoft has 3 different areas of where they are sourcing data. The world knowledge from Bing. There are 2.5 billion entries, kind of which are being searched in Bing. In Windows, there's 1.2 billion devices which are running on Windows. And there is telemetry data around this one. There's an organizational knowledge, which is the way how the Office suite is working, or how the Dynamics suite is working, kind of specifically to a workload or to a process. And then on the other side, there's an individual knowledge. And individual knowledge is the way of how you, in your social engagement with LinkedIn engage, or also if you're using Cortana, kind of what questions are you asking? And what's the reply? And how is the conversation going? And if you take this all together, it becomes very powerful. You can see on the bottom a few data points of the scale we're talking about. And that's why my first hypothesis would be, if you have a problem which can be solved with an inbuilt SaaS AI, this will be the best way, because you have no chance kind of to bring your own data for your own purpose only to the same extent. It will have limitations, obviously, because it doesn't go into every single industry or process, but it's a very powerful way. 2 examples. The first one is about the Dynamics CRM solutions and ERP solutions. You can see here different functions, and you could have the same picture for different industries. And you can see also what is already included. Let's take the example of marketing. So in the marketing module of your business solution, it allows you already to have the monitoring, the user feedback, the lead scoring, and the capabilities inbuilt, so that you would basically get out of your predefined software solution the insights. Or let's take the customer service. Right? It's a bot framework kind of a digital assist, and this is included and extended to social media platforms right out of the box from the solutions you're having. And then maybe one of the least known applications on the talent side, people management. How do you collect information from the candidate sourcing up to the onboarding, and then how to bring people most productively into your team? Very important on the topic of skilling and reskilling, what we also discussed in the morning. So in each of these different processes, you will find machine learning components, cognitive service components, or advanced analytic components embedded into it. Another example, and I hope that most of you will recognize some of these icons, is in your Office suite. Anybody knows what focused and other? Have you seen this one? Okay, very good. A few people have seen it in your in your Outlook. If you manage your emails, there's a capability to separate between what you have in focused and what you have in other. And if you recognize it, it's changing depending on when you click where, how much time you look at it, or if you then proactively change the rule and move it from other to focus. And this is different than spam. The spam filter is a different part. But here, the idea would be to separate of what you should look first. And if you proactively kind of work with it and let it learn, it becomes very powerful. And the idea would be that in the other, you can kind of screen through and see kind of, is there something popping up? But the focused one will be the one, hopefully still kind of manageable in size, and allows you to kind of keep the focus. Another example, looking for a new kind of position. Kind of people start with building their resume. There's an icon called Resume Assistant. You click on it, it's importing your data from LinkedIn and put it into a format. Or another way, in design ideas, in PowerPoint, sometimes it's difficult to start a new presentation. What's the layout, what's the way you want to kind of put it, or you have pictures and how you are sorting them. You'll get multiple kind of ideas proactively put in there. And again, it will learn over time depending on your preferences. What I'm using a lot is My Analytics. And the insight button you can see in here is it's monitoring your behavior. And I would claim the most important part, or the most important item we need to focus on is time. So where do you spend your time? How do you communicate? When do you engage on different activities? And the My Analytics insight helps you to determine actually what you should do to better utilize your time. And first actually to provide awareness of what are you doing. Who would know how much time they spend on email? Well, everybody would think, oh, it's a lot. But here you would get the facts and you can learn over the site and you can decide also, okay, do you want to change it? Or you're sitting in a meeting, you think it's a lot of meetings. Is there multitasking taking place? So I could go on, but what I want to highlight here is that there's a lot of artificial intelligence inbuilt. And so please try out the new icons, which you might have not seen. The list of capabilities in the Office suite, I think, are 225 features already. Right? So this is a very, very limited selection of that one. So it can be on the business processes, but also on the collaboration and productivity tool side. So that was the pre-build. And now we go to the custom AI. Now what does it mean that you really need to have a problem and you want to start fixing it? You want to start building improved capabilities around it. And the picture I show you here is the 3 stepping stones required to build artificial intelligence and implement it. First one, to collect and to prepare your data. Secondly, to train and evaluate. And then thirdly, to operationalize and to manage. And while there is a very good awareness, especially in the Nordics, about the power of data and how you're collecting them, already they're preparing and structuring and putting into an understandable format is quite difficult. How to train and evaluate? Sometimes a skill problem, and we'll come later to more detail. And then to operationalize is there is increasingly the gap that the information is being reduced to limited audience, while it could be provided to a much richer set of people if it is well managed. Custom-built AI solves very different needs. And I have here 3 different examples of what needs could be, or what a solution could look like. The first one, you might have seen already on the playground, Lapset. Finnish company to prepare child environments. And they recognized that it's actually very time consuming to check kind of each of their playgrounds. And now to decide of what should be replaced, what parts, what need to have maintenance, where do you need to kind of take certain actions. And now they establish a mechanism to have with object recognition kind of seeing which parts might come to break with prediction of what should be done. Is there a bolt what need to be fixed? And by taking pictures over a certain period of time, it will automatically kind of start sourcing the necessary part and schedule the next steps of the maintenance. Example of the whiskey industry. This is brand new. It was released, I think, 2 days ago or 3 days ago. This is the first time that you would have an alcoholic beverage which is brewed and composed not because of the headmaster of a brewery or of a distillery, but because there has been hundreds and hundreds of recipes entered. There are customer feedback being provided. There's sales data injected. And at the end, there was kind of somebody pressing a button, and you would say, okay, this would be the optimal recipe to satisfy consumer needs, to satisfy business needs in terms of sales, and to also kind of find a combination that it is competitively positioned differently. This is a first part, but if you think about food industry going forward, or if you think about all kind of leisure activities, I think it's very important that it will not kind of mean that you don't need to have skills anymore to kind of distill the best whiskey. But creating something where you have indefinite possibilities, I think it's a very intriguing way. I haven't tasted it, but it's come to stores kind of in a couple of months, so stay tuned for that one. It's a Swedish brand. And then the third one, because I want to also think that it's not only business, but it's also the environment. This is an example which came out of a World Hackathon challenge we were supporting back in October. And here, kind of the team kind of created a new solution to predict wildfires, and then have an alert system behind that one. And they're taking a lot, and it was actually together with NASA and with ESA, so the European Space Agency, and they take different layers of data, of climate data, of geographic data, and they say kind of what would be a mechanism to, because of the winds, because of the temperature, the humidity, and other input directions, to better predict it. It's not so it means like normally you would have pretty good understanding in areas like Australia or the US, very important, of like 24 hours or 18 hours before it. But here, if you have long history of data, the team came up to maybe to even 3-4 days, kind of put a high alert and a high risk zone kind of in place kind of effectively. So 3 different examples, very different, right? There's not one pre-built solution, and all have in common, they need to have a lot of good data as a source. If you think about kind of now, when talking about what stage or what maturity do we have in AI, there is always the understanding that we are still early on. And when thinking about these type of examples, we are definitely early on. And now this is not clicking further. Oops, sorry. So this is not kind of going backwards now. One back. Okay, very good. So the maturity level kind of custom-built artificial intelligence. This was a question we discussed with companies across Europe, and this is the representation now from Finland. And it's the same study, and please kind of take a look, kind of it's available in the internet, what used to also referred on stage earlier, where he looked at 8 different capabilities you need. What I want to share here with you is what's the stage of maturity when we think about kind of custom-built AI. And you can see 50% is in the planning phase, there are 14% in the piloting phase. And planning and piloting, 2/3 actually mean they don't take the benefit in terms of the value for business yet into account. The reason why this is the mature level, and it's very similar across Europe. There are even some countries in South Europe and Austria and Germany where there would be another kind of piece of the bar which would say that we have not started. Here you can see actually everybody is already in some stage, so we are kind of one step ahead. But now the biggest task will be to reduce this 50% of planning and accelerate the deployment. Now the three criteria, the three success criteria, kind of are your data estate, then the enterprise-grade technology, so because it's developing so quickly that there would be trust in terms of the technology you are applying, and then skills. And then you can see also the way I put it here is like they are interrelated to each other. Like you need the skills to build your data estate, and the data estate will help you kind of by the technology enablers you are kind of utilizing. And then the faster you are turning the technology wheel, the more you need to turn the skill wheel. And this actually has an impact on the data side again. As I mentioned before already, that within the data part and the size of these wheels represent also the response rate. So there's about 80% of the people said this is the biggest problem. And I turn it now into the positive thing. This is the biggest success criteria if you get your data architecture and your data estate into order. And this does not mean that you need to put everything into one kind of consistent database, but it means you need to have the consistency of how do you have unstructured data built into the structure, and that you are very confident about the input data being relevant for the output data. And not only more data is better, but better data kind of brings better results. The skill part is at the core of my heart, because I think here this is the low-hanging fruit. I think it was in February time, LinkedIn made a survey, and they were asking what prohibits people to learn. Why would kind of be a skill gap being there? And the result was actually that 56% of people responded, we would kind of like to learn more if it is encouraged by the employer. And I think that's very interesting, because we hear also from customers and from partners that they have an offering, but the employers are maybe not utilizing it. So that's definitely kind of an area where we need to talk more about it. And it goes back to my opening about the digital culture. Right? So we need to encourage, because there is the only way to make these wheels turning into the right direction together by kind of building the capabilities. This is one offering for artificial intelligence specifically. It's free of charge. You have tens of modules, AI school from Microsoft. You can kind of get a certification. This is brand new to say that this is a proof that I have a certain level of understanding, because increasingly people also want to showcase that they have a good knowledge base. This is more the technical side, and that's why we also introduced now the business side. You can see on the bottom, you can see all different types of technology enablers, but now AI business school is important, because not only technology questions are to be solved, but it's also the starting point is what is the business problem we have actually at the core. And here these are fairly like light 3 hours, 4 hours of modules for specific industries, kind of on strategy, on cultural elements. I very much encourage you to take a look. And it gives you a very broad perspective also how different companies are doing it. And also how universities are advising it. The AI Business School has been developed together with INSEAD, the French business school. And why all of this is so critical now, it is because to succeed in the business environment, to succeed in a very highly competitive environment, you will need to be fast. This came out in March. And what it says, if you are a fast-growing, high-growth company, you're already at a 37% AI implementation stage. If you are lower growth, you see it's much more linear, you only have at 70%. There's a direct correlation between how companies with high growth are investing versus others. And this, I think, is very important for us to internalize, because this will mean that waiting now kind of is something what kind of can be very difficult to catch up later on. This was the business side. I want to close my talk with a broader societal aspect, because it's good that we are all kind of have more prosperity and we kind of bring kind of more business into our companies. But we always need to think beyond of what it means for nature, what does it mean for the overall world. That's why I want to show you this video.
There are an estimated 90,000 threatened species across the globe. To understand what puts a species at risk, we need to know where are they born, how many survive, where do they go, how far do they go.
At Wildbook, we are using an algorithm to digitally tag individual animals, much like a human fingerprint. So this is a new whale shark for science.
Yes, and we named it Wilma.
Wilma the whale shark.
Microsoft AI gives us the building blocks to analyze public streams of photos and videos and identify individual animals in an instant. AI can determine location, date of sighting, migration patterns, and even an animal's social group. And an intelligent agent can contact the content's owner and ask for the missing detail. Microsoft's AI for Good initiative gives us the technology to create a comprehensive view of the planet's biodiversity. In the last 10 years, we've identified 10 times more whale sharks than ever recorded in human history. By leveraging citizen scientists together with researchers, we can form conservation policies. Microsoft AI will help us accelerate our work by empowering people to take action. What we get back is, wow, this is amazing.
This is amazing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andreas. A really good speech. Any questions? We still have a couple of minutes for questions. While warming up, I'd like to ask you one, since most of the AI capabilities are still somewhat on the cloud. Mm-hmm. And what about, according to your survey, do our Finnish customers see that as a kind of a information security issue or privacy issue, or how do you see it?
So you're correct that there's the speed of development kind of is first in cloud capabilities, right, or in the cloud applications. So if you think about the data and infrastructure capability on Azure at Microsoft, kind of you would have the first deployments kind of when what comes in Azure. But now there's actually increasing effort also to have hybrid kind of architectures into considerations. And there we talk about the edge and computing at the edge. And this actually could also mean that you would have a separate on-premise environment where you do some pre-processing, kind of, and then only sometimes in a secure format, kind of, or non-identifiable data could be moved down to the cloud. And this actually kind of is maybe addressing also the question about security, so that you would keep certain identifiable personal data on-premise, you would process them, and then you would only kind of inject into the broader data models then kind of the information in the cloud.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, I think then we're done.
Okay.
And
thank you.
thank you, Andreas. Let's give him a hand.